on now. 4, 3.
Hi, I'm Michael Feldman, editor of HPCwire, and I'm here with Addison Snell, CEO of Intersect 360 Research, and Nicole Hemsoth of HPCinthecloud. We're doing a special issue edition of Soundbite for ISC. The show just wrapped up a few hours ago, and we're going to go over some of the things we saw at the show and some of our last thoughts before we fly home from Hamburg. So Addison, we just concluded the show, like I said, a few hours ago. What were your overall impressions of the past 3 days?
Thanks, Michael. You know, ISC is a fun show for us, getting to keep touch with all the vendors and all the users across the HPC community, especially those outside the U.S. It's a really powerful show, and there were a lot of themes going on that I think are important in the HPC community. But one that I wasn't expecting that still hit me pretty hard was the strength of some of the technologies or some of the companies that are more the technologies behind the technologies. You know, we've seen it before with things like Mellanox was providing all the silicon for InfiniBand, and therefore no matter who the InfiniBand switch vendor was, they could get the benefit from it. We've talked before about how the HPC storage community is so disaggregated. There's not a dominant storage share, but as you go around and talk about all the different storage solutions, there's so many of them that if you peel back the storage, there's LSI disk behind them. And then of course there's Intel, who's behind a lot of the different OEM server solutions, and then a new one that I hadn't fully appreciated before I met them this time around was STEC, which is a company that's supplying the flash drives to they claim something like 90% of the flash solutions that are on the floor. I haven't been able to verify that, but still, with flash getting hot as a disk topic, to say there's a company behind it that's empowering a lot of that. I thought the technologies behind the technologies were important, and then for the vendors themselves in terms of how they differentiate, people are on common solutions, and therefore software becomes an important differentiation factor, which is what we were talking about an episode or two ago with InfiniBand and some of the other solutions, with software being a differentiating factor. How about you? What are some of the things that you're seeing?
Well, I think it kind of bounces off what you were saying. There were a lot of vendors, component vendors, that were feeding into the OEMs. I mean, my impression was there were a lot of vendors at this show. There was 150 or close to 150 exhibits.
A great show. ISC really growing.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. I think they had almost 2,000 attendees and 150 vendors or organizations, which is a record for
You're saying almost 2,000. I think the last email said 1,998. Right. How hard do you think they were scouring for those last two to try to get
They could invite a couple off the street to come in and just make it 2,000. But yeah, I think Hans Moore was very happy with that, and it is growing. And I mean, the thing for me was it's not quite like SC. Obviously, there's 10,000 people there and like 350 organizations, but it's sort of becoming more like that, and that there's multiple tracks now. You have to kind of pick and choose. For me, it was a little harder because I couldn't go to everything I wanted to.
Very difficult to cover it all at once.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots more news. There were different tracks I wanted to go to. There were sessions I missed that I would have liked to have seen, and just more breadth across the board. I mean, you know, Nicole, you were here covering the cloud. There seemed to be a lot of action in various places. What were your general impressions of what was going on with the cloud side of HPC?
Well, certainly this is not a cloud show, but since we are HPC in the cloud, obviously that was my focus. It was interesting because there were cloud vendors here who are old timers in HPC, who are more than willing to talk to me, like for instance SGI and Cyclone, for instance Microsoft and Azure. They're willing to talk to me about what they have, but this is not the focus. And in fact, along the lines of this not being the focus, I got some interesting reactions from people in HPC across the board. Vendors, end users, research institution members. This is still a growing industry. There's a lot of contention in this topic. So I experienced reactions from extraordinary hopefulness and vibrant discussions about the possibilities after the technology kind of catches up with the theory, and after it becomes clear that it's worth it in HPC.
Yeah.
You know, Nicole, I really appreciate that point of view because as analysts in the HPC community, of course, cloud is a technology area that a lot of people want to talk about. And the number of different definitions of cloud or different products that people are trying to wedge into that cloud space really dominated a lot of the vendor discussions that we were looking at.
It did. I was surprised at the number of definitions-based conversations that I had. And those actually overshadowed any conversations we might have had about the actual products or solutions. We are still in the infancy here in HPC. Everyone agreed, though, that in the enterprise, not even large scale, but certainly smaller scale, that's where it's at. But once the applications and technology and usefulness and cost effectiveness start to align, this is going to be a much bigger picture.
You know, Nicole, you mentioned this not being a cloud show, but directly to that point, we just had an announcement about ISC in the cloud coming out next year, right?
Right, and this one sort of surprised me. I came into this show knowing that this wasn't completely my space, that it was HPC, but I might kind of find some contention, which I did.
You're doing fine.
But ISC Cloud, I think, is going to address some of these specific topics outside of the definitions and the general conversations. We're going to address some of the specifics here, including developing applications that actually work, okay, in this environment. It's a growing topic, but someone obviously thought that there was enough momentum around it to start getting people together and talking about it in an organized fashion. So it's at the end of October. It's again ISC who's sponsoring it, and it'll be exciting.
Well, every time we wrap up a trade show, we like to get around and talk about what things we were impressed with that surprised us. They're kind of in the winners category, that did better than we thought they would, and what things we were a little disappointed in that we thought were going to be better and kind of didn't show up, or a no-show, or didn't do enough. What do you want to do first, the winners category or the losers category?
Let's do the winners.
Let's do the winners category. What were you impressed with, Michael, this time around?
The surprise announcement by Intel, not a huge surprise, but the announcement of their revival of the Larrabee technology going towards an HPC solution now, I consider that big news. It's hard to call that a winner. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think you've got to give Intel points for doing this and committing to it. And they're putting hundreds of millions of dollars behind this. So I'm sort of hopeful that will sort of re-energize those guys to put an accelerator technology out there. It's about they want to do what they want to get in the game in the same way that NVIDIA wants to is in the game now. So I'm gonna pick them as the winner. Plus they had a good show overall. They upped their standings in the top 500. They started an Exascale project.
Exascale, Terra 100, all good for Intel. They got a good show overall.
Yeah, and they were very active here, so you couldn't turn around without hitting an Intel person, whether they're on the show floor or outside. So they seem very committed to this show. They seem recommitted to the space now, and I think they started here. It'll be interesting to see what they do at SC.
Good pick with Intel. And there's a lot of unanswered questions around Larrabee. Of course, we got to figure out what the software development environment's going to be. There's a long way to go, but I agree with you. Intel as a whole really had an above-average show. Nicole, did you have anyone that particularly impressed you?
I did, and frankly, they impressed me outside of ISC. Platform computing is an HPC cloud leader, in my opinion. Their line of products and their kind of approach, I think, is tailored. Now, we also have adaptive computing, which I feel the same way about, so it's kind of a tough call between those two. Now, it might seem surprising that I didn't mention Microsoft and Azure, and I didn't mention some others that Penguin Computing, for instance. But I really feel like Platform is a company to watch, and I look forward to kind of seeing how this changes by the time SC rolls around.
Well, Platform